Well, it's very nice to be have the centrepiece gala, the Mayor's Gala. I've had the Mayor's Gala a couple of times before, but not in this nice big Odeon Leicester Square Theatre. So it's very exciting to see our little movie in there, I must say. And with a huge audience. You know, I haven't sat with an enormous London audience yet, so I'm really looking forward to it.
Huge audience for a huge star, Dame Maggie Smith. Obviously, we're familiar with her on Downton, but this is, fair to say, a very different role. Can you tell us a bit about the character she transforms herself to in this one?
Well, it's not the Dowager Countess that we're used to seeing her in on Sunday nights. No, she's very much playing this extraordinary character of Miss Shepherd, who was, you know, a person who drove her van into Gloucester Crescent and stayed there for the next 18 years, 15 of them in Alan Bennett's driveway, living in a van. She was curmudgeonly, she was extraordinary, she was kind of fiercely intelligent, but in sort of very individual ways. She never said thank you. She drove Alan Bennett round the bend, I think, and a lot of the other residents of the street. But, you know, in the heart of all that role, there was an extraordinary, rather spiritual person, and also a kind of tragedy in the making, I think. So, you know, it's a very rich film in all those ways. Yeah, well, obviously the crux of it really is sort of a bit about the creative process and about what your responsibilities are to your subjects as a writer. And, you know, one of the things the character of Alan as the writer in the film grapples with is that kind of, you know, can you exploit somebody who, you know, is a real person who's living in your front drive, you know, and so I think there's a lot in the film that's about the process of artistic responsibility, about the process of creation, as well as a character study of Miss Shepherd.
Do you think some of the themes will resonate, particularly given the current migrant crisis?
Well, I think homelessness and rootlessness and people not being able to find stability and a sense of community, you know, those of us who have that are extremely fortunate and extremely lucky. And you know, I think people may watch the plight of Miss Shepherd in this movie and it may bring home to them how difficult life is if you don't have those things. Well, I think you get a much more detailed version of Miss Shepherd in the film than you would have done on the stage. You know, it's a very different kind of tonal register, and it allows a lot more detail. And also you've got the great kind of privilege and fascination of seeing it kind of represented in the places that it actually happened. So, you know, that's different for a start.
You talk about experiences filming on location. I believe you had some trouble with your van.
We did have a little bit of trouble with our van because, you know, Camden town is very lively at weekends, and you know, there are a few people there taking substances that probably they shouldn't. And we did come in one Monday morning to find that, you know, rather like some sort of burrow, that some other people had thought it would be quite nice to spend the weekend in the van. So we found there had been interlopers in the van, and we had to clear it all out before we could put Dame Maggie back in it.
Talking of interlopers, if you were faced with the same dilemma as Alan, what do you think you would have done?
Well, as he says, look, if he'd known she was going to stay for 15 years, he wouldn't have asked her in. I don't think any of us would have been as generous and warm-hearted as Alan. I mean, I think we'd like to think we were, but the actual, you know, she'd lived outside his house for 2 years. He knew what he was getting into to some extent. I think Alex Jennings' performance as Alan Bennett, the writer, and Alan Bennett, the disgruntled landlord in the film, is quite an extraordinary one. And I think he's one of our very best and most kind of subtle actors. And I hope this film's going to kind of, you know, make people realise that we've got this other national treasure apart from Maggie Smith and Alan Bennett in our midst.
Of course, the film has a distinctly British character, but do you think it has a global appeal?
I hope so. I mean, that's what we're banking on, and Sony Pictures, who are releasing the film, I think, feel that it will travel. And look, the experience of all these things is, you know, you don't try and make something for a global audience. You make something that's truthful and rooted in its time and its place, and as long as it's got essential humanity, audiences will respond to that. And I think this film has humanity in spades.
It also has a great director behind the camera. Can you talk about that choice?
Well, there wasn't really a choice. I mean, only Nicholas Hytner would ever have directed this film, and you know, he did it with such subtlety and assurance that he brings to all his work, both in the theatre and on film. So, as ever, it's been a great privilege to work with him.
Is there a particular scene in the film that you think really captures the heart of the story, what it's really about?
The heart of the story? Yes, I think, without wanting to give too much away, I think some of those scenes when she's finally taken away from the van, there's one section where she's taken away from the van and she goes to the day centre for the day. I find that one of the most moving sections of the film.